This is Ken Pylon. We're at the 2014 BroadbandVision conference. Matt Polka, our old friend, is about to be on stage. And Matt, I know there's going to be a lot to talk about. Two things just this week that I want to ask your opinion about. First one, sports blackout ruling by the FCC. What does that mean in your terms?
First off, it's a huge issue that the FCC has undertaken to actually stand up against large entrenched sports and programming interests and to say we're going to get rid of old and outdated regulations that are harming consumers. The NFL, the sports programmers, the sports content providers, very, very powerful, lobbied very heavily to keep these rules in place that allows them actually to maximize economics, locally. But the FCC said, no, we're going to get rid of it. So I think it bodes very well for the FCC in general, just to say we're going to take a hard look at regulations, and where they don't make sense, we're going to get rid of them, even if there are extremely large and powerful interests like the NFL, and what's pretty much more powerful than the NFL these days, right? Even despite their problems, they've said no. Now, it does remain to be seen what the NFL and the content companies and the TV stations do in response to this. They can very well, by contract, establish the same kind of blackout zone. The FCC has warned them not to take that action. And in fact, members of Congress this week have said in response to the FCC action, if you do, NFL and stations and networks take that action, then we will strongly consider eliminating the antitrust exemption that the leagues all currently enjoy. So that's a major, major step going forward. So I give the FCC an enormous amount of credit, as well as I commend Chairman Wheeler for his leadership on moving on an issue that's really, really difficult when you have these interests that are lobbying so heavily.
Yeah, and based on my experience with local content, people have seen that the more they get the product out there, the more it's viewed and watched, and so the blackouts might not make commercial sense.
It only was something that benefited the leagues, and again, that's all it comes down to is their economics and maintaining their economics. And so the more leverage they have, the more they could leverage the economics from consumers. So this is a case where the FCC said time for that to go.
Now, another thing that's been in the news this week, and I think in some ways there might be related, and this whole idea of the online MVPD. Why don't you tell us your thoughts on that?
Sure. A couple of years ago, Sky Angel, which is an online video distributor, filed a program access complaint against Discovery saying that it was denied fair pricing for programming. And the FCC said, well, you're an online video distributor. You are not a multi-video programming distributor, an MVPD, so these rules don't apply to you. So they dismissed the case essentially, but at the same time, they put out a rulemaking that said, should an OVD ultimately become an MVPD, which would give OVDs access to program access rules as well as other things that they would have to comply with, like retransmission consent, etc. So the FCC is at least starting to consider whether an OVD should be changed by way of its definition to be an MVPD subject to all of the rules. They haven't made any commitments yet or any conclusions, but it does raise a lot of interesting issues related to greater competition. I mean, this could actually bring back Aereo into the picture as an OVD subject to MVPD rules like retransmission consent and other things. At the same time, for the FCC to consider this, I know at ACA we filed on this issue and said it's questionable whether the statute really gives the FCC authority to say that they could change the definition, but they're going to take a look at it. At the same time, while the FCC may look at program access rules, we've been arguing for more than 2 years that the FCC should change the definition of the program access rules to allow buying groups like the National Cable Television Cooperative, where our members get programming, and make sure that the program access rules specifically apply to buying groups as Congress specifically set forth back in 1992. So if the FCC is going to move forward on OVD and MVPD, we sure want them to move forward on the NCTC program access buying group issue as well.
Well, that's interesting, because I suppose an argument could be made that a buying group could almost be the MVPD in this new definition, right?
It could be, yeah. And as we see new over-the-top providers being announced, it's certainly possible. And that's one of the things we're going to talk about here at BroadbandVision from a cable CEO perspective, which what is the future going to be like? Are we going to be just simply broadband pipes? How important is cable video? Do we see ourselves as an over-the-top video provider, competitor? Do we see ourselves allowing, or not allowing, would have to give access, but being okay by giving access to an online video provider if it gets us out of the middle of the constant programming disputes that we find ourselves in with the large programmers, networks, retransmission consent broadcasters, et cetera. So it's a fascinating time, and I think the FCC is looking ahead as well and looking at trying to update its rules to meet the future.
Well, super, Matt. I will look forward to seeing your panel and look forward to talking to Steve Cochran to give kind of that operator angle. So
thanks, Ken. Nice to be with you. Thanks a lot. Appreciate it.